So this conversation will take a little bit of a step back from the prior panel that was more exclusively covering the small-scale commercial segment. Inevitably, some of the topics will overlap, but in this conversation, we're going to take some time out to really pinpoint some of the key growth opportunities that both GTM and some of our industry experts here have been looking at in 2014 and over the next couple of years, and also look at some of the key customer origination and also project origination strategies that are being toyed around with to help scale up a commercial market that has, at least compared to the residential market, struggled to achieve the same kind of healthy growth rates. So for starters, I'm going to let my panelists briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll start off with the first question.
Great. Good. Thank you very much, Corey. So my name is Jesse Grossman. I'm the CEO of Soltage, and we got going in around 2006, and Soltage is a solar finance and asset management firm. We develop, acquire, finance, construct, own, and operate projects currently across, 8 or 9 states on the eastern seaboard, and we've done around 75 megawatts so far.
And I'm TJ Kanczewski. I'm the president of Innovative Solar and also the keyboard player for our Solar Battle of the Bands band.
It's important. It's important.
Yeah. Innovative Solar, we got started in 2008. We kind of branched off of Innovative Development, but we are predominantly an EPC company. We're also starting to do a little bit of development and focus all across the United States and a little bit overseas right now.
Great. Laura.
Hi, my name is Laura Stern. I'm president of Nautilus Solar Energy. We are a solar energy solutions provider focusing on the commercial industrial space. We also do third-party asset management. And we were also founded in 2006 and operate mostly on the East Coast, Western US, and Canada.
Great. All right, well, we'll jump right into it. So as I mentioned, the commercial market is struggling to grow at the same rate as residential. We're expecting that the market will add a little over 1 gigawatt, growing from a national perspective only around 1.5% year over year. Of course, some of the regional market dynamics vary, but if you had a magic wand and you could fix one systemic challenge that is hampering growth within the broader commercial solar market in 2015, what would you address? We'll start off with Jesse.
Yeah, no, great question. And I'm thinking about the top 5, but I'll pick one, and I would say net metering. Absolutely is, I feel the core of the way that our clients are able to interact bidirectionally with the utility grid and what allows for the fundamental tenets of our deals to move forward. And so, the states that have net metering, thankfully, we're up to 43 states plus the District of Columbia. But those continue to be challenged and need to continue to be strengthened. And then the ones that don't have them yet need to have them pushed forward. And so, in terms of seeing a long-term viable market, the other things we can certainly talk about in this panel, and they sort themselves out. But I think, fundamentally, we really continue to focus on net metering.
It's an interesting point, only in that, when we think about a lot of these emerging net metering and rate design battles, a lot of that is really extending to the residential market. And when you look at just fundamentally the way rates are oftentimes designed for any net meter commercial customer, it's hard to deal with some of these insurmountable challenges with respect to some of these higher fixed charges. And so it seems almost like a sunk challenge that you can't fix altogether. Although I guess this is a theoretical conversation anyway, so.
Yeah, no, I find them highly linked. It's hard to discuss,
Sure.
hard to discuss just one without the other. Yeah. But I do feel like the conversations typically do start there and then trend through the regulatory processes.
Great.
Yeah.
How about you, TJ?
If I had a magic wand, I would wave that magic wand and have SEIA kind of initiate a campaign where some of the top 25 companies that have installed solar, you kind of get spokespeople from those companies and talk about the solar that they've installed on their buildings and how it generates energy and talk about the savings. I know most of us here at this event, we speak the same language and we can talk amongst ourselves about all these things we need to do, but I think we need to have the customers who have already installed solar promote solar.
Sure.
So it comes from people from outside the industry. So,
Right.
so if SEIA almost had like a Got Solar, kind of like the Got Milk campaign. There's like a Got Solar with, Walmart, IKEA, Walgreens, companies like that. I think it would be really helpful for commercial solar.
And I think that speaks to a broader theme about how can you standardize and what types of particularly effective customer origination strategies work and ultimately don't work right now. And obviously, leveraging off of a pre-existing referral base like you have with perhaps IKEA or something like that is an important factor to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So what about you, Laura?
I'm going to pick two, actually. One is in terms of bottlenecks that we're looking at and the market is experiencing, states or localities that have regulatory or utility punctuated subsidy programs or RFPs are very disruptive and don't allow for an open flow of project development. So projects can be done very easily, for example, in New Jersey and other states where you really just apply for an SREC and you get it, rather than waiting 6 months with an SREC auction. So one magic wand would be, some kind of feed-in tariff or some open access program that allows developers to easily put their projects into the queue, whatever queue it is, and get some kind of rapid response. The other is really the credit question that came up in the last panel. The number of projects that could be built if credit was looked at a little differently would expand the market exponentially. And I think what the industry needs is some product that allows bankers to really assess the market a little bit more rationally and take a look at what the real risk is, because there's people always talk about off-taker credit risk, but I have heard of very, very few off-taker defaults as a result of off-taker default for a project versus defaults from a sponsor default. I mean, I don't know how many people in the room have actually experienced an off-taker default driving your project into bankruptcy, but I think there have been a lot of developer defaults that have done that, and people have to look at the risks and kind of make some analysis that's better than a standardized model that everybody's just looking at. I think there's some product that somebody will develop.
Great. Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of important points about, I think that there is this higher level of sensitivity to the way a state incentive market is designed for commercial solar relative to the residential market. And obviously also on the due diligence and risk analysis for a customer that you're originating, that's an equally important challenge, although a whole other conversation in itself as well. So maybe, just to start off with the state incentive and state market landscape, if you look at, let's say, a market like California, I've had actually conversations with at least one developer here today where the narrative about the growth potential in California's market really differs from the numbers that we're seeing on the ground. So in California, with the depletion of the CSI rebate funding, we've seen that market stay more or less still from just an installation figure perspective, constrained by the legacy projects that have been able to reserve whatever CSI funding has been available in the final couple of steps. But counter to that, we are definitely still hearing a growing number of developers begin to develop projects outside of the CSI rebate program altogether. And I'm curious, to what extent, Laura, since you've been active in California, does that narrative hold true for the work that you're doing within California?
I mean, we see California as probably 8 different markets. So
Sure.
We don't think there's one market in California, and there's a big variability in terms of the installation as well. So we look at the programs and where we can operate, and ideally where we can be competitive, and have some market parity without any subsidies at all. And that's the holy grail for all of us.
Sure, yeah. And then along the lines for either of you, I guess maybe starting with Jesse, I know for you mostly have been focused out on the East Coast, but if you had to, let's say, pick one state where you could double down your sales efforts in 2015, which state would it be?
Yeah. Well, my team pulled together some interesting analysis, not too long ago, and it was looking at, the markets that we're currently in, and I think it was just a subset of 4 markets, and the RPS standards on those 4 markets are just over 2 gigawatts right now, and that is growing in the next 10 years just in those 4 states where we're, actively installing and developing and acquiring projects over 8 gigawatts, and so I could pick any one of those 4 states and a number of others where it would be worthwhile for us to double our sales and development team. And just the point I'm trying to make there is that in the states that we're working in, and I saw the chart this morning. I'm not sure how many of us were here in the morning session, where it's showing the flatness of the commercial solar over a couple of years and how it might be a flat, maybe slightly up, slightly down market this year. I thought that was very interesting, and I want to go into the metadata behind that and see if that's just more California dropping off from a commercial perspective than anything else, because we're seeing good growth and development on the East Coast markets, the availability of RPS markets to build into, and across the board, new markets opening up here and there. So if I was to pick one or two, I'd say keep going in Massachusetts, throw some more folks in North Carolina, and then there's a couple of states that are interesting that we're watching, like Pennsylvania and some of the Midwest states where we might see some interesting pops as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Massachusetts has definitely been, I would say, emerging as the leading source of demand for commercial solar over the past 12 months. But we're obviously seeing this transition from the first SREC market to the second SREC market there, where the way the program is designed, it's favoring development of more 650 kW and below systems as opposed to that slew of 6 megawatt solar farms that have driven demand to date.
Yep.
And so, I mean, what is the case for Soltage to actually stay in a market where you've been more so focused on developing projects that you can't develop anymore?
Well, and this is, I feel like, the world that we all exist in, which is, the CNI small utility space is, I think, by its nature, rather fractured and rather sort of idiosyncratic. And so we understand as business people working in these markets that there is a period of opportunity, and I have never been more surprised at how fast capital recruits to available opportunities than in the solar space, because it's just lightning fast. These states think their markets are going to have a 3 or 4 year window. They're blown out in 9 months, and they've got waiting lists on the queues. And so I think that's just a feature of how we do business, which is, you kind of get a bunch of sort of curves that you're looking at, which are the different states in which you're looking to draw capacity out of. And you do some work in Massachusetts for a while, understand it's going to have a high, medium, and low period, or the slope will flatten out, and you look for the other states. Thankfully, we live in the nice thing about the fractured market is we've got 50 states and a lot of business among those 50 states in aggregate.
Right. Well, and so I mean, how much of a bottleneck then is the fact that you have fragmented state incentive dynamics towards actually having a more national scaled up approach?
Oh, it's a huge bottleneck. Yeah, and I think it's a fundamental system issue that we've got here, and there's challenges and opportunities around that. I think the benefit is, and what we've certainly focused on doing, is setting up financing tools, development strategies, acquisition strategies that can work across all 50 states.
Sure.
And that for us has been the real win to focus on, so that we're not just a Massachusetts company and we live and die on Massachusetts or New Jersey, but can actually sort of say, we're across the U.S. and in fact the diversity is helpful from a risk analysis perspective.
Great. Yeah, and I want to circle back to what you have actually standardized, because the word standardization is perhaps thrown around more than commercial solar within the commercial market. But TJ, I know you have a couple surprising states perhaps that you've been really active in over the past 12 months.
Well, since we're based in South Bend, Indiana, we naturally kind of like to roll up our sleeves and help advance the industry in states like Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois. And I would say that it's been challenging, but it's been really exciting at the same time. Back 7 years ago in 2007, I think the largest solar installation in the state of Indiana was 20 or 30 kilowatts. And today, like just Innovatus, we've been a part of 2 10 megawatt projects. The biggest one in the state is nearing 20 megawatts at the Indianapolis airport. And we have another 10 megawatt project we're working on in Indiana. So it's, even though, Indiana's kind of in the middle part of the country, and, progress usually happens on the East Coast and the West Coast, and it slowly makes its way to Indiana. Things are happening there. But I did like.
But also, just to check in specifically with Indiana, that's another example where that market is constrained perhaps by IPL and NIPSCO's feed-in tariff opportunities, right?
It is. I mean, that feed-in tariff program is over and done. But it helped inspire a couple other utilities to kick off some programs. And also, I think, more Indiana companies got to touch and feel solar, and so they're a little bit more comfortable about the concept. But in Shale's presentation earlier this morning, he had Michigan popping up as a state that reached grid parity by, I think it was 2016. I know this was residential focused, but I think there are a lot of opportunities in Michigan. A lot of the cities in Michigan, they have solar RFPs out. The mayor of Grand Rapids declared a few years ago that Grand Rapids was going to run off 100% renewables by 2025.
Okay.
So I think there are a lot of companies who have already done solar installations in Michigan, and I would say if we had to double down, we would do it in Michigan just to prepare for some of that growth in 2016.
Right. And that's actually a really great segue towards the concept of how do you scale up commercial solar. And that, the perspective Innovatus holds, correct me if I'm wrong, is basically trying to aggregate a patchwork of, select utility procurement opportunities across a fragmented number of state markets. Yeah. But, a lot of that is basically being the smartest guy in the room and figuring out where are some of these opportunities I can essentially arbitrage where they're new to procuring solar and I can step in and be that first mover. And I'm curious, is that really a scalable strategy that, Soltage and Nautilus can apply to? Or is this something that, only a few developers can actually employ?
Well, I mean, it's definitely geared towards Innovatus in our business model. I mean, obviously, like a solar city, someone who has thousands of employees, they have to go after certain markets for all the right reasons. And I think at Innovatus, we're still at a stage where we're kind of flexible. Mm-hmm. We're definitely very passionate about solar energy, so sometimes the reasons we get involved in these solar projects, it's not about making as much money as we can. It's about, advancing the industry. So I think the patchwork approach, it's been effective for us, but as the electricity prices continue to rise throughout the Midwest, and I think I brought up this example last year. There's a nuclear plant on Lake Michigan, Cook Nuclear Plant, and it's at the end of its 30-year service life, and they have to upgrade it, and it's a $1.4 billion upgrade. So the small utility in our area, which is Indiana Michigan Power, it's going to pass that on to the ratepayers. I&M's owned by AEP, but just in our area alone, like we're in South Bend, the rates are going to go up 30% or so in the next 4 to 5 years. And so, the nice thing about our patchwork approach is that we've got projects in our portfolio, we've got customers in the Midwest that are happy, and I think that patchwork is going to continue to grow into a very nice quilt.
Sure. Great. So Jesse, I know when you've thought about your strategy for achieving scale, it's been less perhaps from a geographic lens, but more from either project origination or a customer origination lens. Is that correct? And so what are some of the key elements you have targeted in standardizing your approach to achieving scale?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we do have an active development arm, and development is in our DNA, and I feel like it makes us a better company in everything that we do. Not only the development, but also the acquisition and the financing, where we're actually able to work with our partners with a real common level of knowledge and intelligence about the development process. So for us, like I think probably most in the room, you start by saying, where are the opportunities available, what state markets make sense in the region that can I work in, and or which ones have favorable net metering interconnection policies such that I can go in and compete and develop on a competitive basis with the retail electricity power. So that's where we start, and then we run through the typical development process that we've talked about with land acquisition, customer acquisition, interconnection, permitting, all of those steps, and it's one of the things I really talk about with my team, and I think is important in the solar space, is what we're doing day in and day out is not that complex, fundamentally, right? We're putting up things with rocks and glass and wires out the back that make power. Okay, that's great. The complexity is in the execution. And so we really spend a lot of time focusing on the execution and making sure our development process, leads as much as possible, to a project in the good box. Talking about scale, and this gets to, TJ, what you were talking about, we really feel that all development is local, right? You need to be on the ground, you need to have boots on the ground, you need to know what's going on at the local utilities, the local tax boards, the planning boards, whatnot. You just can't get around it. This is a really, fingers in the dirt sort of process. There's probably a better metaphor for that. But that's really it. And so for us, scale has also been about not only our own development process and making sure that makes a lot of sense, but partnerships. Holding hands and locking arms with other development teams across the U.S. And be they two guys and a credit card, or the larger development teams that are really good and kind of knock out 20, 30, 40 megawatts a year, partnering with them, understanding what they're looking for in their business model, and being able to accurately portray and transparently portray what we do as a business, and then linking up to turn some of the to make quilts.
We're the quilt business.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's all well and good, and I think important. But I wonder, you have some other unique elements to Soltage's business model, in that you have leveraged, partnerships. We were talking earlier about the work you're doing with Greenwood and with Biosar to have an attempt to at least vertically integrate a part of your portfolio that you're developing. Sure. And I'm curious, to what extent has that kind of vertical integration contributed to some of the triple-digit million-dollar funds that you've been able to receive with the likes of John Hancock and whatnot?
Well, that kind of grew out of our strategy and understanding, what was needed to develop projects at scale and then finance projects at scale. And we found that there was, I think, a lack of appropriate financial sophistication, across the board with the investors we were working with, the products that were out there in existence already that we had ready access to. And so, one of the areas that we focused a lot of, I think, intellectual creativity on, and a lot of work and late nights, was saying, okay, how do we try to create the investment in the solar C&I space and have that really mirror other sort of financial products that are out there, and then be able to sort of sound that off the investment community, see if our ideas were good or not, and then go back to the drawing board and refine that. And we did that over the course of a couple of years, a couple one-off project financings with some utilities, some back leverage with some other folks, really understanding the financial markets. And I think, grown out of that is, something that was, I think, clear to a lot of the folks in the room and has been talked about, which is, we need to find the right mousetrap to finance large commercial and small utility at scale. We're challenged by the things we were talking about in the last panel earlier today, lack of credit consistency, lack of technology consistency and whatnot. And so, we kind of then stepped up the food chain and said, let us be the group creating the financial products and, putting our own equity in and creating an investment product for other groups to put money in. And we put that product together and put it out on the street, and we were really pleased with the uptake from the likes of the John Hancocks and some of the union pension funds and some of the banks on the tax equity side that we worked with. And I would say it's a good start. I don't think we've really totally figured it out and we've got this nailed. We've got some nice announcements that should come out in the next couple of weeks about sort of the next generation of that. And we're also helped by having a large backer that's one of the largest IPPs in the U.S. And so we're able to really use and create our own balance sheet to invest in solar. So I think the point is that the people that are in the room and that have a common set of knowledge, as we get more and more into the decision-making positions of making the financial decisions for the project, that's when we'll be able to figure out the mousetrap of financing C&I and small utility solar, and we'll understand the credit and understand the risks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, outside of really trying to have that kind of vertical integration, when you extend the conversation to standardizing not how you just, originate a project, there's a lot of work, I think, to be done within standardizing just the customer origination process. And I know, Laura, with Nautilus, you guys have toyed with some, relatively innovative customer origination strategies, at least for commercial solar, although they're perhaps old hat for residential. For example, with the partnership you recently launched with one of the roofing companies out in California.
Right, right. And it's interesting to hear Jesse talk. I mean, we also have development in our DNA, and we have been actively trying to dilute that, I would say, because it's, this business is moving too fast to have the mentality of a developer that develops a 350 megawatt project. This is, that will take 5 years. We need to move faster. So we have adopted, actively adopted a lot of strategies from the residential space and are really, trying to leverage our team so that we, so that they're the most efficient and that we can have the biggest reach into the market. So in addition to some of these partnerships that we've announced, and I think we're going to also announce some more in the near future,